of the world tonight, because we're live. I can say today. If you look outside, if you happen to be watching this on delay, and it's like I think 6:30, southwest sky, little red dot, that'll be Mars. And yes, I believe it is visible to the naked eye. The other guest that we have on at 5 o'clock is a guy by the name of Grant Smith-Ellis, who has been with us before, if you're keeping score at home. He was one of our guests on the Cannabis Chat show that we do on Fridays with David Rabinovitz that we call The Green Rush, the business of cannabis. That's Fridays from 4 to 6. And of course, we had a few challenges, technically, let's just say, last week on Friday when we just couldn't produce a show, so we live streamed an old show. This is what happens sometimes when you are so dependent on technology to live stream. Back in the day, you just had to worry about the transmitter transmitting the information over the air in radio and in TV. You know, they actually still do transmit radio and TV over the air. No one remembers it, but they actually do. You can actually get a radio that gets music and news, and same thing with televisions these days. You actually can have over-the-air channels. You don't have to go through Netflix or Hulu or Comcast or RCN or Verizon or any of the other carriers out there. You can actually get content over the air for free. Now, I don't want to get into a discussion about how there really isn't anything free anymore, because the products that are advertised on all commercial television, trust me when I tell you, it's all built into your consumption of those products or services that you're seeing advertised. But anyway, at 5 o'clock, he will be joining us. That is Grant Smith-Ellis. And he is kind of he also hosts his own podcast. He is an education person that is involved with MassCan. So he's an educator for MassCan. That's the Massachusetts Cannabis Group. And our friend David Rabinovitz is involved with MassCan, and he's the one who introduced us to Grant. He does a whole thing on education online. You can use Google and find him relatively easy and check out some of his podcasts. He'll be joining us at 5 o'clock. And then at 5:30 is a gentleman by the name of Nurse Mark. Mark Worcester is his name, and he is now part of the Green Nurse Group. And if you're not familiar with the Green Nurse Group, Sherry Tutkus is a registered nurse who is kind of the founder of the Green Nurse Group. In fact, I don't think it's actually kind of a founder. She is. And she's been hosting shows on Facebook now for at least 2 years, because that's as long as I've known her. And she's the one who introduced me to Mark, who I believe is her new partner in the Green Nurse Group. And I can't wait one day to actually get Sherry in on one of our shows, because she and I have co-anchored the old News Dabs weekly video that we used to do here at Pro Cannabis Media. That kind of morphed into Weed Talk News that I do with Kurt Dalton from cannabis.net. And yes, once again, we will be having a Weed Talk News produced tomorrow night and for release on Friday. That's when we get reports from Deborah Borchardt at the Green Market Report. From New York, we get Solomon Israel's Canada report. He's with MJ Biz Daily International out of Canada. And we also get a report from Washington, D.C., and our friends from the Vote Pro podcast. That'll be Phil Adams and group down there in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where absolutely nothing goes on anymore because nobody wants to do anything before the election happens. So guess what? I voted today. Yes, I did. And I was very, very happy of the fact that I was able to fill out my ballot and then drop it off at the city hall. I even took a picture of it before I dropped it off, and then I took a picture of me putting it into the actual bin, if you will, or the collector of voting ballots that's out front of the Needham, Massachusetts post office, city hall where I voted. And that's where all the ballots will be collected. And I'm pretty sure I've already gotten a confirmation that they received my ballot. So this is definitely the first time I've ever voted by mail. And I got to tell you, I actually feel like it's more secure than when I walk into a polling place and they ask me my name and where I live. I tell them, they tell me which ward I go into because I can never remember that. And then they just check you off, but they never ask for your ID. Are you kidding me? That's how we vote in this country. They don't ask for your ID. They just want to see that you registered in that name at that address. Just saying. I felt this way was more secure than that way. That's how I feel. So at 5:30, about 90 minutes or so away, we'll be talking with Mark Worcester. He is the Green Nurse, or Nurse Mark. He's part of the Green Nurse group, and he is nursemark.com. And yes, indeed, he'll be joining us as well. Now, as I mentioned right off the top of the show, that we would be doing a few news items, what have you. There are a couple of things I do want to mention before we get to our first little soundbite with Andrew Elk from Revolutionary Clinics. And as you know, delivery licenses in Massachusetts are being introduced and starting to be applied for, not necessarily divvied out just yet, but they're out there. We'll get an update from Grant Smith-Ellis on that. But I can tell you that some interesting news notes came across the desk today, and I think I'll actually throw this out at you because it's about as far away a place as you can possibly get. Did you know that New Zealand, which really is on the other side of the world, they are going to vote a nationwide referendum on the legalization of cannabis in the country of New Zealand? And that's on Saturday. And interestingly enough, it's very close. It's practically split, 49%, and 1% no opinion. So that could go either way in New Zealand, something to think about. We'll certainly have results on that. As we mentioned about the state of Maine, they have opened up their recreational sales. And I believe on the first day they sold $100,000 of weed, which they think is a big deal. But just keep in mind, it took Massachusetts, I believe, 4.5 months to get to $1 million a day. Now, the state of Massachusetts and the state of Maine, even though they were one once, they actually were one state once, there are differences. There are differences in laws, there's differences in population, differences in people and the makeup and all this. But Maine has always been my second home. I spent my summers up there. I spent 11 years of my career at the CBS affiliate in Portland, Maine, doing sports for them at WGME TV. And as you know, in the United States of America, even though 11 states have now legalized cannabis sales for adult use, every law in every state is different. Now, Andrew Elk from the Revolutionary Clinics talked a little bit about how challenging it is to actually know some of the laws that are unique to Massachusetts and different from other states. Check it out. You used the word trichome.
Yes, trichome.
One of the things I like to do on this show, because of the vernacular, everybody seems to have different buzzwords, terpenes and trichomes.
Right.
Can you define what a trichome is?
Certainly. So a trichome is that when you look at a cannabis nug or a bud or a bit of flower, and you see that characteristic sort of sugar crystal, it almost looks like a frosting of sugar across the texture of the plant.
Yeah.
So those are individual little sacs filled with terpenes and cannabinoids. So when we're extracting, when we're making a cannabis concentrate, we're basically separating plant material from those little sugar crystals. It's inside those sugar crystals that we have our THC, our CBD, all of our special cannabinoids that make us feel good, and then terpenes, which are flavor and have their own sort of medicinal effects.
Man, this business has gotten really complicated, and you need a chemistry degree just to go out and find some decent flower, right? Some decent bud, and you don't need a clipboard or an album cover. Back in the day, you don't even know what albums are, do you?
Of course I know what albums are.
Thank God. My God. Okay, so that was educational, but it had nothing to do with different laws in different states because your host, me, screwed it up. I introduced the wrong clip. My fault. We actually have 4 other clips from Andrew that we have queued up and cut out from that show from last Wednesday. We'll be sharing them with you. And I'm going out on a limb thinking, we all make mistakes, but it's important that you learn from your mistakes. So I'll actually refer to my notes this time, instead of relying on my memory, to remember which one is next. And that was what are trichomes, and I hope you paid attention so you learned something about cannabis net, about cannabis sativa, the plant. Crazy, crazy day. That's what I can tell you about today. Now, we mentioned New Zealand. There was also another news item that I found. Everybody might remember Isaiah Thomas, and not the Isaiah Thomas that played for the Boston Celtics, but the Isaiah Thomas that is the two-time NBA champion for they called themselves the Bad Boys, the Detroit Pistons. And Isaiah, like so many athletes, and again, I don't like to call them ex-athletes because I believe that once an athlete, always an athlete, okay? Just saying. It's not like you lose your athletic ability. You may lose the ability to play at a high level anymore, but you're still an athlete in your brain. Anyway, he is now the CEO of a cannabis company. It's called One World Pharma. It's a Colombia-based producer of cannabis and hemp ingredients. And, you know, he talks a lot about, in this article, about how sports helped him prepare for leadership positions in business. It's always a theme of a lot of former athletes who get into business and use their, they understand how teamwork works, putting together a team. Everybody plays to their strengths. You help out other people's weaknesses, and therefore you have a solid championship team on your side, whether it's a business or an actual youth team or a professional team or a semi-pro team. But Isaiah Thomas is the latest former professional athlete to enter the cannabis space. And we did talk a lot about Maine and how they have opened up their recreational sales. And sure enough, there's a character in the police department of Bangor, Maine. And by the way, I worked in Maine. You pronounced the name Bangor, not Banger, okay? Bangor. Very simple, very, very particular about that. My friend Tim Throckmorton still does sports up there in Bangor, Maine. Anyway, this guy, this policeman from Bangor, took to Facebook, and I guess he does posts. The guy's got a lot of followings, and people listen to him, and he's very funny. He's a very clever law enforcement officer, and his recent posts about the new laws in Maine were picked up by Marijuana Moment, which is a great newsworthy newsletter that I get daily in my email box, and I certainly recommend it to anybody who wants to learn about what is going on around the United States of America in the world of cannabis. And because it was new, he decided to do a little rant about the use of cannabis, and he's pretty funny. Google, this is the first thing he says. Everybody wants to ask him questions about the laws. Right. And the laws are, Google is your friend. Read the Maine state statutes. Ask your friendly and professional purveyor of marijuana. He goes on and on and on, and you can Google it and find out more. But as we always do on this show, at 4:20, we do take a break. And for those of you in the cannabis community, a lot of you already are familiar with the 420 code. That was the time that the group of high school students in San Rafael, California in 1971 used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue across the street from their high school and catch a buzz. And that's how that 420 code became part of the vernacular, because law enforcement picked it up and used it as a code to say, hey, public consumption of cannabis going on at the corner of so-and-so and such and such. Check it out, it's 420. Cannabis community uses 420 as a time to partake and enjoy. Class is over, work is almost over, go out and relax, get yourself a little buzz. My story is at that time, around the same time in 1971, Jonathan Edwards' song Shanty was the rave in New England, because it all talked a little bit about what Jonathan Edwards used to do when he sat around with his friends. So every 420, we take a break and we enlighten you about the song called Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. Take it away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean, I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
And we want to thank our friends at WSCA Studios up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, for that little clip with Jonathan Edwards. And that song, Shanty, was my 420. I was not part of the Waldos. I was part of another group, and we'll protect the identity of some of the people who I know are still out there and watching and all that neat stuff. But that was back in the day in the early 70s, and Jonathan Edwards' song was played on a regular basis on a local radio station in the greater Boston area, Cambridge actually, WCAS 740 AM, daytimer. It was alternative rock back then, because WBCN was the rock station on FM, and FM was like, revolutionary. Now it's like, please, nobody even goes on the radio anymore. Everybody wants to pick and choose what they watch, pick and choose what they listen to on your own time, in your own way, as opposed to the old days that used to be, we used to dictate, we being the media people, we used to say, if you want to watch this episode of MASH, you better be there at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on Thursdays, or whenever the heck MASH was on back in the day in the 70s and 80s. And I used to watch, well, on my dinner breaks back in the day. But anyway, that was a long time ago. We are waiting for Professor Bruce Bugbee to join us on Zoom in just a few minutes. And I can tell you a little bit about Bruce, or since you're queuing that up, Dan, should we run another soundbite? And if I want to, huh? All right, let me see if I can get in the right order, because that was really important for me. And I know which one it is. So this one that we're going to run here is about being a connoisseur, being a sommelier, being someone who specializes in cannabis. And there is a cult that is evolving about this, the connoisseurs of cannabis. Anyway, Andrew talks about the different strains. Check it out.
Part of it. You know, there is higher and lower quality flower production, and some of that is what soil you grow in, whether you use soil at all, the conditions of the growing. Just like you can have high quality tomatoes grown on the vine or low quality tomatoes. The big thing is understanding, like test percentage is what a lot of people shoot for as the standard for success, right? If you have a high THC test percentage, used to be that 25 was the be-all end-all, now 35 was the be-all end-all, and now there are high, basically, you go back to the 60s, we're talking about 6% THC. That's what the Beatles were smoking.
Yes, it was.
And people say, oh, this isn't
Do you know
the
who
stuff.
gave the Beatles their first weed?
Who
you don't know this?
No, I don't.
I found this out. I'm trying to remember who told me this, but it was Bob Dylan. Who told me? David Beatonstock from the greatest moments in weed history. And I knew the answer, but I couldn't play. I knew it. I said, as soon as you say the name, I'm going to know it.
Yeah.
It's Bob Dylan. I said, isn't it Robert Zimmerman? Isn't that his real name? Anyway.
No. But that's one standard that people shoot for. But a lot of it has to do with plant structure. Is it frosty? Like, there are a lot of criteria that people look for in cannabis. Is it the right shape? Does it have sort of this frosty, trichomed exterior? So there are things like I can taste and I can appreciate really high quality stuff, like our Black Mamba, our last couple batches of Bootylicious. Like, there are some really special strains in the Rev Clinics lineup. And there's also just cannabis, you know, there's just weed, you know, there's stuff that you just smoke.
All right, we're back. And, you know, it is amazing to me how quickly the cannabis culture has evolved to develop connoisseurs, to develop the, what do they call it, designer strains of cannabis. And in just a few minutes, we're hoping that Professor Bugbee will join us, and we'll talk to him about hydroponics. Actually, I'm going to try and get some tips from him on how to keep my deck plants alive. And yes, those deck plants have nothing to do with cannabis. It's a hibiscus, and there's a white flower, and there's a pink flower, and there's another white flower. And I couldn't tell you exactly what the names of these flowers are, but it is what it is. So anyway, we will continue to fill here. Let me tell you a little bit about this guy, Bruce Bugbee, though. He worked with NASA. And has anybody ever seen the movie The Martian with Matt Damon? Really a fun thriller, science fiction thriller about an excursion to Mars. There was another Netflix series recently that had something to do with that too. I think they called it Away. But anyway, this guy, Bruce Bugbee, actually consulted with the producers of that movie, The Martian. And if you remember, there's a scene there where they're actually growing vegetables on Mars. Now, granted, it was movie, so it was make-believe Mars. But they are already talking about an expedition to the red state. That would be not the red states of America, but the red planet. It's a planet, not a state. I know, it's a planet. I know that. Anyway, it's going to be in the sky in the southwest. I think it's in the southwest tonight in the sky. The red planets will be able to be viewed. So he's worked with NASA. He talks about self-sustaining ecosystems, which I guess if you're a botanist means you can actually create a way to grow food to sustain itself. Yes? Wait, hang on a second. I don't know. I'm going to be perfectly honest, and I'm going to ask him to define it. But my guy right there, Dan French. Now, can you punch yourself up, Mr. Studio Director? You're going to talk. We got to see who's doing it, okay? Now tell me what an ecosystem is, will you please?
One, it's ecosystem.
Ecosystem. See, there's one. I think economics, not economics. Anyway, go ahead.
From my understanding,
Yeah.
Things, various plants that work together, like what Dozy was talking about, that work together and keep the system self-sustaining.
Gotcha.
So it can go through many generations of a life cycle and just stay in one place.
Okay.
And let's say like around a pond,
Yeah.
weeds have an ecosystem around there.
I get you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Now, are you a botanist but no, you just knew that because you're most recent high school graduate in the room. I can understand that. Anyway, thank you very much for that enlightenment. That's what we do here on Professor Weed Wednesdays is we try to enlighten you. And now I'd like to be enlightened by connecting with the professor, but we're working on that as well. But it's interesting that this guy, Professor Bugbee, criticized the use of indoor farming as a means of solving food shortages. And it has to do with the fact that there's a large amount of electricity. And you know, we visited the only solar-powered dispensary in Massachusetts last fall, I believe, and that is Solar Therapeutics down in Somerset, Mass., which is the home of Jerry Remy, but also just outside of Fall River. And they are the only dispensary in Massachusetts to be totally solar powered. And I really wonder why more grow farms out there aren't trying to do more solar powered systems, even if they're using indoor grow lights powered by the solar. Makes a lot more sense, and it also saves a lot of money on electricity to grow these plants indoors, and that's what they're working on. Now, if you could actually hear my studio director, Dan French, say, he actually used, referenced a former guest on this show called Dozy Mbonu from Philadelphia, and he has a very interesting product. Now, I'm not even sure, did we ever get the soundbite from Dozy? We did. Okay, great. And it's a long one. So we could, I really wanted the professor to hear about this product, which is really what the plan was during the show. But when you're live, you really have no control over whether someone is going to either walk in that door and be your in-studio guest or pick up the Zoom call, click, put the audio on, put the video on, and join us live. We certainly have invited quite a few today on this show, and we are still hoping to connect with Professor Bruce Bugbee. And if I know Isabel, she's working very hard and trying to connect with that guy right now and contact him. I will say the guy's been at Utah State since 1981, and it was when he first started working with NASA in 1981. And he was part of the team to first grow crops on the International Space Station. This is why I really wanted to talk to this guy. First of all, I love space travel, science fiction, all that crazy stuff. And I just am interested to hear what he thinks about where we're going now with space travel and exploration. And I think I actually saw a rocket with an American astronaut in it take off from Russia for the International Space Station somewhere in my memory over the last 24 to 48 hours. So I'm just saying that's still going on, and I'm guessing they're still growing crops up there on the space station. And this guy, Professor Bruce Bugbee, was instrumental in making that happen. I will say that if he finds out about this product that Dozy told us about on this show, he's going to get very excited, because I think anytime that you can use organic material and throw it back into the world, into the earth, this is good for the earth, this is good for the material, and we all know that organic vegetables and fruits seem to be more potent than non-organic fruits and vegetables. So that being said, Dan, we've got Dozy queued up, do we? Almost? Almost, he says. Okay, and there he is. So, without any further ado, rather have me explain about this fungi that he's involved with. We're going to let Dozy explain what this fungi does and its impact on its potential impact on the entire cannabis industry. Check it out.
But during that decade, my aunt, Dr. Janneret, was working for the Department of Agriculture's Forestry Service. And I would go on vacation with my mother and brother in the summer to see her.
So just dump out of them. We got the professor. We'll come back to it and then re-cue it up. Yep. Okay, so guess what? We heard the doorbell ring on Zoom, which basically means the Professor Bruce Bugbee has joined us. And I think we're just looking to get connected. Hello there, Professor. How are you?
Hi, Jimmy. Yeah, good. I'll hang up
So
here.
I was reading your life story to my audience to fill some time till we connected. So I appreciate you joining us. How are you?
Yeah, happy to be here. So
you've been at Utah State since 1981?
yes.
Well, that's very impressive because I graduated college in 1979, so that we're kind of age appropriate, that means, in a lot of ways. So first of all, I think it's awesome the work you do. And I was talking a little bit about your work with NASA because I am fascinated with space travel, science fiction. I understand that we're actually going to be able to see Mars in the sky tonight, according to my favorite weatherman anyway, locally here in Boston. So can you please tell me how you first got involved with NASA and how you figured out how to actually grow anything on Mars or on in other planets, on the moon? Explain a little bit about your self-sustaining ecosystems. Go ahead.
But by the way, just as a note, your image is kind of, it doesn't show people, it shows a camera. Maybe the one I'm seeing is something different than everybody else.
Yes, it is. But I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback. No, they're actually looking at me in the studio. And
so what I'm seeing
we've got four cameras we get to pick from, and that's the one that you get to see that one, and the audience is seeing another, but I appreciate you picking.
Oh, there you are.
Tell me a little bit. Yeah.
There you are. Great. Yeah, it seems more personable now. I'm looking at you.
Okay.
So, yeah, this is sort of my life story in 20 seconds or so, but I grew up doing a lot of, in a rural place and doing a lot of repairs and building stuff. And I had the opportunity to do that because it was rural. So early on in graduate school, I started thinking about, gee, I could build some boxes and growth chambers and do tests on plants with temperature and light. And this was a long time ago. It was way before LEDs. And that led to my interest in doing this in graduate school and using controlled environments. And we like to say around here, our plants never see the sun and they never touch soil. It's just so very controlled. That isn't completely true because we use greenhouses, but it's highly controlled so we can very precisely test hypotheses. So as I was finishing a PhD, a position came up at Utah State University on a project funded by NASA. And here I was already doing these controlled environment tests. And so I got the position, and you never think you're going to stay at one place for a long, long time, but one thing led to another, and I love it. I'm still working on it. So.
Now, I also read in your bio that you were a consultant on the movie The Martian with Matt Damon, one of my favorite flicks. And I'll never forget that scene where they were actually growing potatoes in that makeshift greenhouse on Mars. Can you tell us a little bit about your role on that?
Yeah, somebody else put that I was a consultant. I mean, I did do a lot of interviews about that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't technically a consultant in the early stages of the movie.
Gotcha.
But I did over 20 interviews for magazines, and most of them wanted to know, how real is this? How technically exact is it? and you know, it's fun for a botanist to find all the little things in that movie that aren't strictly correct. But hey, it's science fiction, you know, just enjoy the movie, and it's not every little detail has to be correct, but it's that movie really catapulted an interest in space exploration, and particularly in growing food away from planet Earth.
As far away, quite a few million miles away from planet Earth, in fact.
Yeah.
I saw that on the news today, too, with my favorite weatherman locally here. Let me ask you about your feelings about indoor farming, though. And I was just talking as I was filling while we were connecting. There's one solar-powered cannabis dispensary grow in Massachusetts. It's called Solar Therapeutics. And I believe the entire building is solar powered. They get 60% of their total power for their grow facility in that same building from solar. Doesn't it make sense with a crop like cannabis or hemp to use the power of the sun to grow this stuff? What are the challenges with that?
You're exactly right, Jimmy. I have a video online that has several 100,000 views, and the title of it's a lecture I gave in a university class, and the title of it is "Why Indoor Farming Won't Save the Planet." And so, and I'm shutting off my cell phone.
I think. How much fun is that?
The reason is as efficient as solar panels are, and as efficient as LEDs are, that's still two big steps that are less than 100% efficient. So it makes sense to use sunlight directly, which is what you suggested.
Yeah.
Now, when we do that, we also have to take high wind and high rain and hailstorms, and there's a lot of other environmental factors that are not optimal in order to get free sunlight. So then we use greenhouses, that helps. Mm-hmm. And if you want the very highest quality of a very valuable commodity, then you can pay for all the solar panels. But it does take somewhere between 2 and 3 acres of solar panels to light up 1 acre of production. So it's not a 1-to-1. You can't, 1 acre of solar panels won't give you 1 acre of sunlight.
How important is the growth of hemp to help the climate change that pretty much everybody in the world recognizes, except for a few, let's just say? How sustainable can hemp be to curing a lot of the ills that wreak our environment these days?
One of the answers I give to this is when we look at indoor growing of, say, lettuce, for example, which is also a big enterprise, very fresh, very high quality lettuce. If we can get people eating more fresh vegetables because they're high quality, that'll reduce cancer rates. And what's the value of that? That is an enormous value. Mm-hmm. So if we can get people to have better diets, better pharmaceuticals, the public health benefits can be just enormous.
You mentioned diet. It's not something I like to talk about too much because I consider my diet, I'm not proud of it, let's just say, but it's been part of me for a long time. I also recognize that plant diets are superior. There's been some tremendous documentaries I've watched about that. Are you a vegan? I got to throw it out there. Are you a vegan?
No, I aspire to eat less meat.
There you go.
And I do my best, but honest, meat is really good.
Yeah, that's what I say to the kids that are surrounded by vegans, and I always say, I really like the taste of a hamburger. I'm sorry, it's part of my world, right?
For me personally, I just try to eat less meat, and when there's a choice, I don't claim to be a vegetarian. I just try to eat minimal amounts of meat, and for that matter, animal products.
we touched a little bit about climate change, and I do want to kind of keep on that theme for a second because, as you know, the western part of the United States, California, Oregon, even Washington State, they've been devastated by these horrific fires. As you know, what happens with fires, ash happens, and then you've got just a desolate, almost like the lunar surface it looks sometimes after a fire. How is science, and specifically your field, how can that help bring back the green that was part of that area in the United States?
Yep, thanks for that question. I'm in a department that's called Plants, Soils, and Climate. And the climate scientists in my department are all engaged in studying climate change. What people don't realize is there's really not an argument about whether there's global warming and whether it's caused by CO2. The argument is the extent to which all of that causes erratic weather.
Right.
And if it causes erratic weather, then we got a problem. What's wrong with gradual warming? You know, the Canadians have that T-shirt, I'm in favor of global warming. and you say, well, Miami might flood, so let them move. You know, what's wrong with that? But erratic weather is the controversial part of this. And you can see how that can be really controversial. Does it change airflow patterns globally? There's pretty powerful evidence that it does, in my opinion, when I study that literature. But boy, that is a hard change of behavior. The result of that conclusion is we should use less fossil fuels. And boy, none of us wants to have to do that. That's the hard part. If it was easy to do, we would have done it a long time ago.
That's right.
So now we're really requiring extraordinary proof that we need to stop using fossil fuels because it's super hard for all of society to do.
And the use of hemp can take the place that we could use. Hemp can be transformed into so many different products. And now at least there's a movement. There's the Farm Bill of 2018. Of course, now you've got the government involved, and one department's pointing the finger at the other department to say, okay, it's your responsibility. No, it's your responsibility. Well, what if they put it into food? Well, it's really part of a drug, and nobody wants to take responsibility for regulating it now that it's out there. Who knows what's going to happen in our government over the next few weeks? Let's just leave it at that, shall we? That being said, the role that hemp can play as far as job growth, as far as better for the environment, all of those things are in play now that you can grow hemp relatively legally in the United States, correct?
Yeah. The term that we have used for people, the university uses this term, we are studying botanical medicines. And 100% of people say, oh, that is really, really good. Keep studying those. And then we say the key one is cannabis.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, well, if you're studying it for a botanical medicines, it's sort of related to not eating so much meat. It's eating more plant products. And now we're using pharmaceuticals from plant products. This is all good. It's very fundamentally good. So when we go to legislators and say, you need to make this more legal, we should say, you need to make botanical medicines more legal.
Right.
That's a very politically acceptable thing.
Well, we're getting to the point now where they're actually talking about psilocybin. And we actually interviewed a really interesting guy from the Philadelphia area who's got a fungi that can be used to serve as a catalyst in all plants. You understand that, don't you?
Yeah, sure.
Can you explain how that works?
Oh, as an example of that, these cannabinoid molecules are synthesized by cannabis, uniquely synthesized by cannabis. But once we understand the molecular biology of that, we can take those genes and put them in fungus. And there is certainly the theoretical potential to make cannabinoids with fungus. not higher plants. And there's many drugs that we know how to do. It just turns out it's cheaper to grow the plant than even though you could make it in the lab, it's so expensive. It's cheaper to grow the plant using free sunlight. But we keep coming back to if you put a spin on it, like drugs are bad, well, that's just terminology that sounds negative. But we just as well can say botanical medicines are good, and that's a real positive spin.
Right, and I'm all about positive spins. In fact, I can't believe that in 2020, I used to be a sportscaster. I used to have a sports talk show, and now I'm talking about cannabis. I mean, I never, in my own home state of Massachusetts, where it's now legal for adult use and has been since 2016. What are the laws in Utah? Do you have a medicinal program in Utah?
We do, and Utah is politically a pretty conservative state, but they recognize the value of, well, botanical medicines. And right. Some of it is mothers that had kids with epilepsy, and then we brought them in front of the state legislature, and we said, look, do you want us to keep going to Colorado and buying this illegally, or are you going to let us grow it here? And it was a powerful argument.
Yep.
So we now have legalized both medical hemp and medical marijuana in Utah.
That's
you
great.
Need to have a license to grow it, but
right.
It's legal.
And I'm sure now, are they in Massachusetts? They tax the adult use, but don't tax the medicine side. Are they obvious? They're not taxing the medicine in Utah, are they?
No, they're not, and it's only legal for medical use in Utah. Yep. It's not legal recreationally here.
Right, and then I'm assuming that there are doctors in the state that are certified to justify a prescription, if you will, for a medical card, similar to what they have here in Massachusetts.
That's
correct. I should have done I did my homework on you, but I didn't do my homework on the state. Okay, so don't knock me down a half a grade or anything on my interview. Okay, I appreciate that.
I'm an easy grader.
So am I, by the way. I'm a sucker. You know, I tell people, you all start with a C, and if you do the work and you do it well, you're going to get above a C. Okay, I said, but if you end up with a C or a C plus, it means you really got an F. Okay, so please don't let me do that. Where do you think the future is going to go in this development and this research? I mean, the science has taken it so far. They've understood now that the endocannabinoid system is part of all mammals. You know, we're talking about it openly now. We're not going around the corner to imbibe or anything like that. But are we, if things move in the direction I'm hoping, I'm from Massachusetts, in the election, we could see it decriminalized. Now, if it gets decriminalized at the federal level, will that open up the research that I know you want to see open, right?
Absolutely. And all universities get money from the federal government for all kinds of things.
Yep.
And for that reason, all universities are, even though it's legal in our states, we're very reluctant to do work on high THC cannabis because it's still federally illegal. But about 3 seconds after that becomes legal, there's a lot of us that are poised to do wonderful studies on this and really take advantage of all the beneficial effects.
Professor Bugbee, I've talked to a lot of scientists, professors, botanists, the scientists that are in the testing labs. By the way, by far the smartest people I've ever interviewed. Now, granted, I was a sportscaster. We make it, very clear. But I am fascinated with the fact that you can actually dictate the DNA of a plant now to make it a percentage of THC, more terpenes. It's amazing to me the advances on something that was considered a weed, right? We're going to see more of that now?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And when you think about it, Watson and Crick elucidated the structure of DNA 70 years ago. I mean, a long time ago.
Yep.
So we've had this long running start on manipulating genes to have desirable effects. So there's a tremendous infrastructure that we can apply to this. And again, it improves the benefits and minimizes the risks.
And that is about it. And you'll find so many other things. They discover new cannabinoids all the time now in this plant, and it's going to be interesting to be on the outside or even on the inside of this industry and talking to others like yourself who have certainly understand the science better than I do. Since my idea of science was astronomy when I was at Tufts University. So, and that's why I knew that Mars was going to be in the sky tonight. Well, it's always in the sky, but we're actually going to be able to see it tonight. One more thing, I did notice in news recently that the Americans, an American astronaut went up to the International Space Station, I believe this week, to join, and I think she went up, or I think it was a she, went up in a Russian rocket to the International Space Station. You're nodding, so I was right? I did actually see this.
Yeah. I don't know about this most recent thing, but we certainly have been sending astronauts to the space station on Russian rockets now for a while.
Yeah, and are they growing stuff up there on that space station?
Yes, we are. We've got a small plant growth chamber up there, and from time to time, we are able to get funding to do specific experiments to try some different things. But in between those experiments, they can still use it to grow like leafy greens. And those are very prized among the people on the space station, fresh greens.
Well, and of course, there's a follow-up question to this that I have to ask. Will we ever see the day where they will grow cannabis at the International Space Station, or is that science fiction?
Oh no, none of science fiction always becomes real eventually. But I think the cannabis is more likely to be on Mars. By the time we get to Mars, the space station will be retired. Here's an example, Jimmy. Yeah. I'm involved with this multi-university group funded by NASA. It's called the CUBES project. Some of my colleagues, they're at UC Davis, are looking at putting the genes to synthesize aspirin into lettuce. And when you go to Mars, pharmaceuticals degrade. So not only do you need to grow your own food, you need to grow your own pharmaceuticals on Mars. And so if we can make certain types of lettuce make aspirin, for sure we can. We don't need to put genes. The cannabis already has the genes. All we need to do is recognize the beneficial effects of it and then grow it. And
fantastic.
I think that's going to happen. Now, don't ask me exactly when, but I think it's going to happen.
Well, I hope we both live to see that day, Professor Bugbee, and I really appreciate you making the effort and joining us on Cannabis Chat to enlighten us a little bit about this amazing plant that has an incredible upside, can really make a difference and change other people's lives. And I can tell already that you've seen that happen in your home state in Utah, and hopefully we'll see more of that, correct?
Yep, we're looking forward to it becoming federally legal. And again, that's not science fiction. I think that's just a steady march toward the day when it'll happen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Professor Bruce Bugbee from Utah State, for joining us here today. And we'll keep in touch. And please like, share, and subscribe, as they say in social media, if you know how to do that. I leave that up to the young people I work with, just for the record. All right? Thanks again, Professor. Jimmy. Appreciate it. That was really fascinating, guys. I mean, this is why I love what I do in so many ways, because I meet the smartest people I've ever met and look at the future, where we're going to go, and what role this plant can actually play in the future history of not just the United States of America, but the whole solar system. That's pretty crazy. All right, we got to take a break, and then when we come back, we're hoping to talk to our next guest So don't go away. And I think, Dan, are you going to play this new, this is going to be the debut, I think. Is it the debut of the new? Yeah. Check out the new debut of the Pro Cannabis Media Sizzle Reel. Check it out.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
All right, so what'd you think? What'd you think? Did you like that? Didn't you like it? We already made a few edits to it, but there's a lot of stuff on there and a lot of people that we've met and talked to and interviewed over the years. You did see Bruce Linton in that little promotional that we talked about, and we'll be talking with Bruce Linton after this live stream that will be coming up, probably in just about an hour or so. So we sit here in the studio, we interview people for another hour, and then you'll see an interview that Kurt Dalton and I did with his friend, Bruce Linton. I suppose he's my friend now too, because he wears that Legal Seafoods t-shirt that's so cool that says legal on it. It's fish in the shape of a cannabis plant. I'm not sure you've ever seen it, but we've got our guy. We've got Grant with us. Grant, are you there?
I am, Jimmy. I just getting my camera plugged in, apparently. Very nice to see you, or hear you at least.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to hearing, and we're glad that we're hearing you, which is obviously the first step. And then hopefully, and there you are. And you're a veteran. I called you a multimedia journalist. Are you comfortable with that title?
Oh, I thought you were going to call me a service veteran. And I said, no, goodness, I'm not a service veteran, but I would say I've had some media experience.
And you are, what David Rabinovitz, our mutual friend, told me about you is you actually do live stream the Cannabis Control Commission meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, they used to, the commission used to stream the hearings themselves, but after they went virtual, their staff couldn't really broadcast it, so I actually do it directly, yeah.
There you go. And I also noticed that you host your own podcast and you have like a virtual education center with MassCan. Tell me how that all came about.
Well, MassCan's Virtual Ed Village, for folks who don't know, the Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition is one of the oldest cannabis activist anti-prohibition nonprofits in Massachusetts. Goes back to 1989. That organization is known for its yearly Boston Freedom Rally, but it also does a lot of other great things, one of which is an education village. The Education Village started under the tutelage of a wonderful MassCan board member named Catherine Rifkin about 7 years ago, maybe a little bit less, 6 years ago. And it has evolved slowly over time from in-person panels at various events, like at the State House and such, to now an online iteration. I don't host it myself. It's actually a platform for members of the community, but we've done 18 of them since COVID started and reached over 100,000 people, which I think is a testament to the kind of the community's impact on cannabis without question.
Grant, we just interviewed a professor of botany from Utah State. His name is Professor Bruce Bugbee, and he's all about ecosystems and self-sustaining, being able to grow plants, including cannabis, on Mars and in the space station. And you know, he totally embraces it and says, "This is the future. This is where we're going to go." Are you amazed that in 2020, in Massachusetts, where it is a adult use legal product, that we're able to talk about cannabis and continue to educate the public about this amazing plant? I pinch myself all the time about this because I can't believe I lived to see the day.
Well, it reminds me of a funny story I was telling earlier today. Growing up in college, I wouldn't say I was that rebellious, but I did try cannabis before I discovered its medicinal properties socially from time to time. And on one of those occasions, my mother, wonderful woman, does a lot of great work, pro bono advocacy for victims of sexual violence and such, bless her heart. But she used to come in and would say to us, you know, you got to stop smoking that cannabis in this house because it's illegal. And if you want to do it, you got to change the laws. And just maybe 6 months ago, I was visiting her on her back porch smoking a joint, and she started saying, "Oh, that's, you know, really smelling up my back porch here." And I said, "Well, you know, if you want me to stop, you're going to have to change the laws."
I love it. That's a great story. That is a great story. What about that smell, by the way? You know, smoking it in public is still illegal according to the law. And I'm talking about Massachusetts here, and even in most states, right? So will there ever be a time, you know, it's funny, I should have asked the botanist this, can they grow odor-free weed?
Well, so first, one important clarification, because I think medical patients in Massachusetts will benefit from this. I think it's I'm going to forget. It's 94G13C, I think. But in any event, there is a subsection of the statute that actually allows medical patients to smoke in public anywhere where cigarettes are allowed. And so medical patients in Massachusetts can smoke in public, but those without a medical card can't. As to your question, part of cannabis can be stripped of its smell, what you know, the terpenes, obviously you were talking about those last segment, but when you do that, it creates a concentrate, and then you'd be vaping. An odorless cannabis in flower form to be smoked, I perhaps genetically it could be done, but not with the technology now that I know of.
There you go. Well, we all know that technology changes every day. And I remember, as my studio director, Dan French, reminded me that at MJ BizCon last December, we actually interviewed a guy who was growing odorless cannabis from Colombia and Canada. He claimed it was odorless. By the way, there was no demonstration on the floor at the Las Vegas Convention Center. I just want to say, no proof. Hey, as someone who's been around the community now for a number of years, you're still learning. I mean, I'm amazed every time I meet someone or talk with someone about this. They always have something to teach or something to share. If I were to put you on the spot and said, did you know, what would you say? What is it about the cannabis plant that you would share that you think you can stump me on or just enlighten me about?
Oh, that's a unique question. I guess I would say something like, Well, see, it brings me in two different directions because there's questions about the plant and then there's questions about the regulations and laws surrounding the plant. If I were going to ask you about the plant, I guess I would say, at what point in the development of the trichome do you know that an outdoor cannabis plant is ready for harvesting?
Okay, first of all, we just played a clip from Andrew Elk, about trichomes. So this is going to be what I would call an educated guess. Not a lot of confidence, but I'm going to guess when it starts to flake. No?
No, so it's good guess.
I knew I'd be wrong.
No, good guess. But when you're looking at the your buds as they're about to be ready for harvest, you're going to take a 30x magnifying glass. And if you see them go, and I know I'm going to get this right, I might get it wrong. If you see them go from milky to clear, that is the perfect time to harvest.
And we're right at the harvest time right now, correct? What have you visited any harvest labs or grow facilities to see the action?
A micro business I've seen, but I've never seen a cultivator that's bigger than 5,000 square feet.
There you go. And one of the things we also talked about with Professor Bugbee was the use of solar power. You know, Solar Therapeutics down in Somerset is the only one in the state. And with all the socially responsible capitalism that's going on inside this industry, I really would like to see more solar-powered dispensaries, or at least grow facilities, or at least partially solar-powered. Well, do you think we'll ever see that? And doesn't the state offer incentives for solar-powered? I think they do for domestic use, but not for commercial.
They do, and it's an interesting quirk of the regulations with regards to the Cannabis Control Commission. They encourage people to, I believe, try one type of light that is, like you say, energy rated. I don't know the specific details, but the issue is the commission is very strict with what you can use for your lighting. So although they encourage you to use energy efficient lighting, they don't allow a lot of experimentation, and that slows down the rollout of progressive development technology.
This is probably a loaded question for you because I know you are regularly involved with the commission. They're easy targets to pick on, and they've had an extremely difficult job to create regulations from scratch, or at least use other states' regulations as some guide work. They've now lost a commissioner. What's your opinion of what kind of a job that Steve Hoffman and the other commissioners have done so far up to this point in Massachusetts?
Well, that's a big question. I think it's an important question. I'd say a few pieces of groundwork before diving into it. One would be the recognition that I think each commissioner is different. So Commissioner McBride, Commissioner Title, Chairman Hoffman, Commissioner Flanagan are the remaining commissioners. Like you mentioned, Commissioner K. Doyle just left. I think they're each different and have had different priorities and would measure their own success from the perspective of their different priorities. But that said, there are also universal arbiters or measurements of the success of their ability to implement their mandate per the law. And in terms of that, I will say that I was a big critic, and I still am in many ways, of the failures of the CCC to accomplish some of its mandates. But I've also seen, in particular over the past 8 months, an almost supersonic or exponential increase in the rate of provisional licenses being approved, in the rate of equity licenses being approved, in the willingness of the commission to be bold on things like caregiver access, expanded format for equity delivery, expanded equity periods for those delivery licenses. And so everything that I've seen, for some reason, for a pattern of about 6 to 8 months now, has been moving in a positive direction. And while there's a lot more work to be done, if they continue to approve 60 to 70 provisional licenses per hearing, and if the ratio of equity applicants and disadvantaged business applicants and economic empowerment applicants continues to go up, I'm perfectly content to see them move in that direction.
And I know that it was part of the law was to help those who have been most impacted on the war on drugs to get an opportunity, a leg up, if you will. But we also recognize the realities of regulations, that there's so many layers and what have you. It costs you an arm and a leg just to get to the starting line. I have a friend that runs a dispensary. I won't name him, but he, it took him quite a few $1 million just to open up the door to his vertical dispensary. And, it's amazing to me. People think that you're in the cannabis business. Oh my God, you're going to make $1 million. Oh my God, it's going to be such a big thing. There's so many layers that cut down on those profit margins. I don't know how people are going to actually have a sustainable business. Are you worried about that?
I think it depends on a number of factors. Not every business is the same, which I think we all realize. And, there are different operational license tiers. There are different types of licenses. For context, the Boston Globe last year reported that one group of 3 medical dispensaries, so one owner, 3 medical dispensaries, made $90 million in revenue over 12 months. Now, what this recognizes is these people had come to fruition, were open, operational, had developed supply lines, and were at 100% capacity. Recognizing the lag there of 3 to 4 years, I think, is the more crucial insight which you're driving at. That worries me, and it in particular worries me for equity applicants and smaller applicants, because some bigger players, MSOs, great that they want to be in the market, but they can survive that lag time going through the regulatory process by offering returns. It's harder for a smaller company that has to own 51% of itself to qualify for its equity status in the first place to maintain that ownership and attract the funding. So maybe it shows my willingness to be progressive, but I support things like S2650, which would be using some of the cannabis excise tax, which by law every year has to be spent on communities disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs, to actually give loans to equity companies to get through that period.
Yeah, that's been an issue in Massachusetts and has been talked about. The use of those funds have not been going in the direction that they were intended to go, which, by the way, anyone who's been around politics, state politics, that's not surprising, okay? I just want to say, look, there are states like Rhode Island, towns like Fall River. There is such a cash grab in every element at every level, whether it's in politics, not just related to cannabis, but everybody wants to get their piece, okay? And what's lacking is like an overseer, someone to say, no, that's not fair. We need to share. And I know that sounds socialistic, but call me socialistic if you want, because I am a sharer, okay? And I do believe that especially with designated funds that are supposed to get plowed back into the industry, to me, that's almost illegal. It's misappropriation of funds, isn't it?
Well, I think that the way the law was written, and you point out, it's a great article by Naomi Martin in the Boston Globe that really dives into this stuff. Last year, there was $70.6 million in cannabis excise tax. That's a small number compared to what it's going to be in 10 years. But of that $70.6 million, $0 went to those communities. Now, the law has in it a clause that 5 subject areas, including public health, substance abuse prevention, communities disproportionately impacted, have to receive funds. But the executive is the one who decides the budget, in this state, because of the line item veto and things like that. And so not just that, because of the way the budget process works. So the governor has managed to dedicate those resources to important causes, substance abuse, treatment, recovery. People, it's not to say those are not important, but he did it in a way that was to the exclusion of funding for communities that were harmed by the drug war, and that's a problem.
That is a problem. It's another reason why I'm let's not go there. Okay, but I do want to talk about this issue in particular. And don't know if have you read the book by Bruce Bugbee called "Weed the People"? It's a great book. It was written in 2015, 2016, around the time when Colorado and Washington State were going through their first round of legalization. And Bruce went out with he's from Washington State because he works for Leafly now. He's the editor of Leafly. And he went out with a friend of his that a lawyer was with the ACLU. And Bruce was not sure which way he was going to vote on adult use recreational in Washington State. And his friend explained to Bruce, he said, look, it's not a drug issue. It's a civil rights issue. And when you look at it that way, and when you look at the statistics that were made public over the last week or so, the Uniform Crime Report out of FBI, that'd be the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a total of 545,602 people were arrested in the U.S. for marijuana-related offenses in 2019, okay? And 495,000 were arrested for violent crimes. As the 92% of that 500,000 total of those who were arrested for possession crimes. Now, to me, that's a perfect example of why it is a civil rights thing, because law enforcement has been profiling black people for decades, okay? And I don't know how many more stats we really need to show this and explain it to people. Why do we have to still explain it to people in 2020? Very frustrating.
Well, I think twofold. One, there are people who, unfortunately, despite the plethora of data that's available, have not taken the time to come to understand the impact that the war on drugs had on minority communities, black and brown communities, Jewish communities, and otherwise. A lot of people don't realize that not only Anslinger at the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the precursor to the DEA, but also Ehrlichman and Nixon would say things openly like, the black people and the Jewish people are using cannabis. Let's develop laws so we can stop them from engaging in civil rights protests by targeting them for nonviolent drug use. And then once you realize that, unfortunately, we've privatized a lot of the prisons in this country, and those privatized prisons on the state level come with contracts where the government agrees to maintain a certain percentage of capacity. And the reality is people from minority communities who possess drugs in a nonviolent capacity are soft targets to fill those quotas. And we've set up this system that incentivizes it. And on top of that, there's another reality, which is even people who know that sometimes undermine the proposals related to equity because it's a threat to their profits. And so those two factors working together create a situation where equity is talked about as a positive, but in reality, when it comes to the lawmaking, you have to keep fighting for it because there's always someone trying to prevent it from being heard or someone who doesn't want to pay attention.
That sounds like the definition of systematic racism, right? It's here. I mean, and by the way, Nixon threw the hippies under the bus too, just for the record, because I remember that quote. Were you around in 1973 by any chance?
No, I have a bit of a compulsion, and I've read the Senate Watergate report, not only from Senator Irving's committee in the summer of '73, but also the final report of the special prosecutor. So I love that time period because I like examining how they caught them.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing, and that was when I was in high school. I graduated high school in '75. Okay. And we talk about the Waldos, the 420 guys from California, right? And in 1971 is when they started that. That's when they claimed that it was like the first time that they would meet at 420 and all that. It coincides with the first year that I tasted and partaked in that cannabis sativa plant. Now, granted, I was not in high school at the time. I was in 8th grade. But you know, I claim it as part of my culture, my upbringing. And I too was ADHD and had no idea I was ADHD. And I was using it to hyper focus on schoolwork or driving. I mean, it was just part of my metabolism growing up. And even though I took 10 years off sober, I went back to it medicinally after I started to get my 4 major surgeries in 22 years since I turned 40. But it is an amazing thing to me that it has been around. And this is just my lifetime. I was not around in 1937, okay, just for the record. And the more history you read about that period of time, it's fascinating to me how racism played a huge role in the development of that first law in 1937 that made it illegal. And yet medical doctors in the 1920s wrote 3 million prescriptions for cannabis in the United States of America. And you know, Mr. Hearst and Mr. DuPont should be ashamed of themselves for what they did to fund Reefer Madness, to get the DEA hired. And it's just a dark mark, a bad mark, if you will, on our history of the United States of America. As I get up on my my history major, filibuster or whatever I am, I'm preaching about that. But hey, Grant, terrific stuff. What's next for MassCan? Do you want to plug something? What's coming up for you guys?
Well, there's always something going on at MassCan. You were kind enough to mention our virtual Ed Villages earlier. Folks can watch those anytime at facebook.com/MassCan. There's a video archive of the previous 18. And then we normally do one a week. We just had a big virtual event, so we haven't been having as many over the past few weeks, but hopefully those will get up and going. And then there's also, I don't know if it'll be virtual this year or not, but in December, we usually hold what's called the Marijuana Ball, where we try to give back to our volunteers. And hopefully we'll have some news about that, whether it's digital or otherwise, coming out sometime soon.
It's a crazy world right now with the COVID thing. And while I enjoy the Zoom interview, I really do love it when people are still able to come into the studio and we've got just enough room to be 6 to 10 feet apart and still talk. And you have an open invite. I mean, David has raved about you, and I listened to him because he's probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life, outside of the science community of cannabis, of course, because those science directors at the various labs, they're brilliant people. I mean, just way beyond my ability to understand, but we all learn. And isn't that what it's all about now? Isn't it all about educating the public? Oh, I got one for you. One more pet peeve, okay? I'm pretty sure that the Cannabis Control Commission has a $250,000 ad budget for public service announcements. And they put out those animated messaging that I thought was so condescending and so pathetic, it really bothered me. Now, I've been railing about a campaign for public service announcements that actually explain the benefits and the responsible use of cannabis, and I have yet to see that. Grant, will we ever see a public service campaign that reflects that?
Well, to circle back to the piece of advice I gave my mom, you have to change the law. And I don't think it will surprise you to learn that the reason that public awareness campaign from the CCC is that way is the text and the style is in the text of the law, dictating to them how they have to run their advertisements around public safety. Now, the reason for that is that the people who wrote the law, a majority of them on the Compromise Committee were fighting for the right thing, but there were a lot of prohibitionists. Another thing you might realize is currently the 3 appointing authorities, the people who choose who goes on the Cannabis Commission, are the governor, the treasurer, the attorney general. All of those people voted against question 4 in 2016. So I think there is going to be a bit of a lag, maybe 5 to 10 years, before we see the messaging surrounding cannabis from our government line up with where the voters want our government to be on that messaging.
Well, there you go. That's a great way to end it, Grant. And that's very insightful. And I really appreciate that because I want to be part of that in some capacity. And if there's anything I can do to help move that forward, other than vote, which I do in my local, in my state, and I actually voted today. And just for the record, that's what we push. We want everybody to vote. I would love to see this election have the most votes ever cast in a election in the last 63 years of my lifetime. To me, no matter what the result is, that would be the biggest win, that we exercised our right to vote. And that is so, so important. And it's also something I think both sides agree on, which is such a rarity these days.
Well, it is interesting. I tend to agree with your optimism. I do think people are engaged, and I do think shows like this and an emphasis on education is what keeps people engaged. So I'm grateful to have been able to come on, and I hope we'll get to do it again.
Yes, please do. You have an open invite out to our studio out here in Wellesley on Route 9. So thank you again, Grant Smith-Ellis. We look forward to seeing your reports online and hearing more about what MassCan is doing out there. Thank you again.
Have a good one.
Yep, you too. So that was great. We're 2 for 2 in interviews right now, I just want to say. Before we go to line up our next interview, and I do believe I can play video before or when a Zoom call comes in. This is all new challenges to us. I'm going to try and get to the right one to introduce our pal, Andrew. I know, I got it written down. I just got to find my notes. It's okay. You know, it's not like I'm reading off a teleprompter. Lord knows I miss those days. So this is Andrew Elk from Rev Clinics talking about the combustion of the cannabis weed in either a pipe, a joint, or he also compares it to vaping. Listen to what he had to say.
Combustion is hot smoke in our throat and lungs.
Yeah.
Nobody likes it. That's why we add ice. That's why we add water.
Gotcha.
Now, vaping, the idea of we're actually not combusting when we're vaping. So
Right, you get right up to that point.
Exactly.
Right?
We're basically using electronic means, basically an oven. We have a tiny oven space, just like the oven in your kitchen, and that's heating up our flour or our concentrate material to the exact temperature where THC starts to float off of the physical material, whether that's plant or whether that's shatter, wax, butter, what have you. So you reach that ideal temperature range, and then you're exactly like you're saying. So you're just inhaling the vapor floating off that material, and that's usually at between 300 and 400 degrees. If you are going for low temperature dabbing, it's sometimes called. It's like the lit tip of a joint, the lit tip of a cigarette is about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. So that was Andrew Elk from a show that we recorded about a week ago. You know what? We live streamed. I don't even know how to talk about this. We recorded it. We live streamed it. We had it live in studio. It's the best of content. You know, back in the day, it was either live TV or it was recorded TV. And now it's completely different. But it is what it is. I've always said if it looks like TV, sounds like TV, it's TV. So that's what we're doing. We're making television content, okay? That's what we're doing here on Cannabis Chat. I can give a plug for Friday afternoon on Cannabis Chat. David Rabinovitz from MassCan will be joining us. I just heard the ding dong, which means that Nurse Mark is going to be joining us momentarily. And I think I actually see him. And that's a good sign because we see him. And that means we can actually talk to him too. Hello, Mark Worcester. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy Young, I'm doing well, thanks.
Hey, twice in 1 week. I love that. You know.
Hey, what are the odds? I'm a lucky guy, right?
Well, I like to fix those odds so I can continue to connect with good people like yourself. First of all, Mark, you know, one thing I don't know about you, and even though I did a little bit more research on you, where are you from originally?
I am from a town 20 miles south of Boston, so I'm a Massachusetts boy, born and bred.
And you're not going to enlighten us on that town?
Yeah, the little town called Easton.
Easton, of course. I know Easton.
Yeah, Stonehill College.
In fact, pretty sure that a great member of the Patriots from the past, of course it has something to do with sports,
of course.
Jim Bowman, long time, I was a safety for the Patriots. He lives in Easton. Do you know him at all?
You know what? We have not met.
Well,
and I'm surprised because I literally spent 56 years in the town.
And did you ever know, I think there was a guidance counselor named Stuart Silverman. Did you ever know him in the schools?
That name is awfully familiar.
Yeah. So that's a guy I grew up with in the Newton area.
Is that right?
Yeah. So there you go. I love that. What is it? 5 separations or whatever.
Yeah. Six separations, right?
Right. And cannabis is a small world to begin with, right?
It is. It really is. You never know who you're going to meet.
That's right. Well, now that we've met, I'd like to get into some pretty good talk here because, first of all, fascinated with your own personal story. I did watch your video about what you are now considered to, this is your life passion. You want to create a community that accepts gender equality, economic opportunity for everybody, and sustainable living.
Yeah.
How'd I do?
You did well.
Thank you very much.
You did well, Jimmy. Thanks.
Thank you very much. You can call me, this is Professor Weed Wednesday. So we want to educate our public a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you got involved with the Green Nurse Group and our pal, Sherry Tutkus.
Oh, Sherry Tutkus. She is the best.
She is.
Yeah. It's a really strange story because I was cannabis agnostic forever and ever and ever. I went into the Marine Corps when I was 17, and that was the end of my cannabis use. And yeah, so, I didn't care if anybody else used it. I just didn't use it.
Right.
And I owned a tech company for 30 years, wasn't even in the healthcare space. And at the end of my career in that tech company, just before I sold it, I went to nursing school nights and weekends because I had time on my hands. And, I got to fill up my time, Jimmy.
Right.
So I became a nurse running the other company, sold the other company, had the nursing degree, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, to be honest with you. I worked in long-term care for a little bit, and then I met a person that had a CBD company, and I had never heard of CBD. I'd never heard really, cannabis, as far as I knew, was just for getting high. That's what people used it for.
Right.
And the more I dove into it, the more I was amazed about what, the possibilities are for healing with this plant. And so the deeper I got, the more I knew that this was a path that my nursing career would take. And so you said it's a small world, right? Sherry and I met at a conference of the American Cannabis Nurses Association, and we immediately became fast friends. And then, over time, she's in Massachusetts, I was in Massachusetts, over time, we got to know each other better and better and better. And then we have just embarked on this new thing together in the Green Nurse.
Well, we love that. And I think one of her sayings is be all you can be, or be your best.
Live your best life.
Be your best, right. Live your best life. That's her
best
thing. And
life.
I love that about Sherry. I mean, it was definitely
she's amazing.
When we first, I know exactly when I met her, who introduced us. And it's one of those moments you just remember when you meet really good people. And I'm just thrilled. It does look like we are going to work together in some capacity.
Yeah,
we're going to air your show on the
Yeah.
Pro Cannabis Media Network. We're going to try and air Sherry's show on the Pro Cannabis Media Network. We're going to try and make it all happen so that we can
Love it.
share the education and share the love. Share the
Yeah,
love with the
man.
cannabis community.
That's right.
It says here, now, do you have a Master of Science in Cannabis Science and Therapeutics? Or are you still studying that?
I'm halfway through, more than halfway through. So I'll graduate in May of 2021 with a master's in medical cannabis science and therapeutics. And it's the first master's program in the country specific to cannabis. And there's 150 students, and it's at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, which is a legit, it's the 4th oldest school of pharmacy in the country, Jimmy.
Yeah.
So it's a legit degree. Who knew? I go from being agnostic to having a master's degree in cannabis science.
Hey,
Craziest
that's right.
things happen.
And I think it's great that the higher educational community, right? It's ridiculous. You can't get away from the puns. You just can't. All right.
You can't. They're built in everywhere.
So the higher education community starting to embrace cannabis because of the depth of the knowledge and the science and the research and the
science
math.
and research that's been done. It's been studied for, as long as it's been illegal, as long as it's been studied. Not here in the United States as much, but It has been studied. There is so much data out there. And, you know, being a nurse, I'm trained to be skeptical of anything that comes out, right? It's just how we're trained in the medical community to always look at it with skepticism. And so we look for evidence, right? The more you look, the more you find the evidence that this is just such a powerful and safe way to heal people.
That's right. And earlier in this show, we talked to Professor Bruce Bugbee from Utah State, who is he's got I would call him an internationally renowned scientist, because he's been working on this since 1981. And he understands the power of the medicine and how important it is to grow it and how to dictate the DNA of the plant. And
it's science, man.
I told him, I said, my science requirement at Tufts University was astronomy. Okay, it just was. It was
and a worthy one it is.
That's right. I think I even took it pass fail just to make sure I got through it. All right, you know, because I just chemistry and biology. As soon as I had to dissect that frog in 10th grade in high school, I was done. I was like, no, I'm done. This is not something I'm interested in.
It is science.
Yeah,
and even the grow. I went to Kentucky to a hemp growers association meeting a couple of years ago because I was looking into growing. And I just had no idea how much this is all science-based. I mean, I got in that room and it was amazing what these farmers were talking about as far as how to grow hemp. And they even admitted, hey, we're 100 years behind corn and wheat. Like we've got a long way to catch up in the genomics and the science behind it. It was amazing.
It still is. And I think when we first talked, the word fascinating drives a lot of cannabis entrepreneurs. It drives scientists. It drives research. It drives journalists or ex-journalists, talk show hosts, whatever the hell you want to call me now. I am fascinated with the amount of knowledge and information that's already out there. And more importantly, if we move forward like I'm hoping we will in a few months, and we can open up that research capacity.
Right.
You know, that's where so many jobs are going to be created, because I really do believe that grant money will become available readily for cannabis research, as opposed to what they have to go through now, which is practically every time they got to go to the Supreme Court to ask for $5.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful because, of course, you know, the purse strings are held by government agencies that don't necessarily believe in the positive nature of the cannabis plant.
Right. That's why there's been 30,000 studies by the substance abuse community trying to find what's wrong with this thing.
I know. And every one of them, believe me, I've read most of them. I'm reading, you know, the latest ones now, and all of them say may have a detrimental effect. It never says we've conclusively proven. No, they can't.
No.
It's a may have. Guess what? That may have means that it may have positive qualities as well.
Well, how about may is less than probably? So, you know, right?
Right.
You know, so anyway, I find it. How many people have you met or talked to that use that phrase, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life?
Oh my gosh, Jimmy, it's just, you know, that was early on. That was one of the things that really just astounded me, is when we'd get feedback from people who had used my former partner's products. They would come back and say, hey, you know, this just literally has changed the course of my life. I had a girl on my podcast last night, a fellow student at University of Maryland, and a nurse who has MS, and she's in her early 30s. And, you know, she suffered a lot, and she was on 22 medications, Jimmy. She's now on none.
Wow.
She is on cannabis as a medication. And that literally took away 22 medications. And I'm talking strong medications when you have MS. You know, you're working with some pretty hefty stuff that have a lot of side effects.
Right. You know, whenever I talk with the members of the medical community, I always talk about the philosophies of Western medicine versus the philosophies of Eastern medicine.
Right.
Where Western medicine goes after the symptoms and Eastern medicine goes after the cause. Is that accurate?
I would equate that. Yeah, I would say that's pretty spot on.
And here's a plant that God put on this earth to help both sides, I just want to say.
Yeah.
And now I'm finding out about new discoveries with, we talked to a guy last week who's got this fungi that you can put into it's an organic, you put it into the cannabis plant and it increases the flower, the potency of it by like 200%.
I met that guy in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Wait, are you
At the end
talking
of
about
2019
Dozy?
in a medical cannabis conference? I swear it was the same guy. And because now that you say it, he had this fungi that literally would increase the yield astronomically.
Right. Dozy.
Yeah.
Dozy Mabonu is the man. He's out of Philadelphia.
Oh man, there's that small world.
It is a small world. Well, you know what? And I'm not even surprised anymore, right?
No.
Because
You
I'm
can't
now talking to so many people. We're doing 5 shows a week now, and you just exponentially meet more people. Hey, I got to introduce you to this guy. Oh, you got to meet so and so. Oh, you got to talk to this guy. And all I'm doing is talking to people, which is what I like to do anyway. So certainly a labor
It's a
of love.
great life, man.
One of the things that hasn't been asked of you, and I'm sure it's a cliche question that's asked all the time, so I left it till I ran out of things to say. No, till now. Okay. You were a Marine at 17. Okay. I don't know what year that was, nor do I really care. It's not really. That's really not important.
Maybe.
Many people that go into the military, when they get out of the military, they suffer from PTSD. There's quite a few veterans out there. They go to the VA, they get put on opioids, and then they've used cannabis to get off them. Okay, I've heard this story.
Yeah.
Now you're going into a profession. You've done your business thing. You've sold your business, and you go into nursing. Now, come on, Marines, tough guys. And I understand you're big on gender equality, as am I. I totally get it.
I am.
Right?
Oh, I am.
So, Marine, nurse, are you getting any crap from friends?
Oh, yeah, of course. I have my whole life, though, Jimmy. You know, 1998, I went on a week-long yoga retreat because a therapist told me it would be a good thing for me to decrease my stress.
Yeah.
And at the time, I owed the Bank of America a ton of money, and they were just crushing me, right? So I have a little stress. I went on that retreat and I came back and immediately became a certified yoga instructor. So my friends are not surprised at this point by the things that I do.
There's nothing wrong with yoga. I do 10 to 12 poses, let's just say, in a day every morning because otherwise I wake up in pain, and I've got a $16,000 hot tub in my backyard, I might add.
Oh.
So, needless to say,
if I ever get your address, you're going to look out and find me in that tub, Jimmy.
And by the way, I will tell you this, and I'm going to go on the. It's unlocked in my backyard. So you know what? Have a blast in it. I have 2 rules.
Rules.
And by the way, this is a mature audience, so I could say these 2 rules. Bathing suits must be worn.
Yeah.
And no exchange of fluids, please, in my tub. Okay. Those are the only 2 rules.
Yeah, I know. Everybody has those rules. Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh.
Nurse Mark, do you have a product? Do you have a product line that was talked about on your website? Tell me a little about the product.
Yeah,
line.
I do. I have a CBD product line because when I started 3 years ago in the industry, I started in the CBD at the side of the house. And I found that it was just really difficult for people to find solid products. So I created a product line, and so I have a product line, and we're formulating right now a product line for the green nurse because we have, the more that we've learned, the more specific we are with our intent on products. So we're doing that as well.
Yeah, and cannabinoid medicine is the theme of our Monday show, but because that education overlaps everything for the most part, whether it's business education or pharmaceutical education or just learning about the product itself. There's a lot of overlap, let's just say.
I think, Sherry and I say it doesn't matter if you're using it recreationally or in the medical programs, you're still using it as medicine. I don't care.
Right. And you know what? I'll never forget when my then 15-year-old, who's now a 30-year-old electrician in North Carolina, was going through my pockets at a Harlem Globetrotters game that we were at, and he came up with my one-hitter. And of course, I had to explain to him that that's daddy's medicine, okay?
Yes.
I've used it medicinally. This is how I use it, and I still preach responsible use. And we'll continue to do that. So
yeah, of course.
And there
we
are
all
plenty
do.
of people out there that go into this is one of the things that the powers that be that are involved with the laws and the rules can't quite grasp. You know, they think, oh, recreationally, that means you're just out there becoming a stoner. No, at all. It just means you don't let it take over your life. Because if you use it in small quantities to balance your endocannabinoid system, to balance your metabolism.
Music to my ears, my man.
Right? I mean,
yes.
And I am going to be leaving my body to science because no one else is going to want it. So
I'm getting to that point now, I think. I got to fill out the paperwork.
Right. Well, now that I know how old you are. Let's go back to some of the products for a second.
Sure.
There are topicals, and then there are tinctures.
Tinctures, ingestibles and topicals,
Right, and some edibles that are out there too.
Yeah.
The testing of these products is still being debated everywhere, okay?
It's still an issue.
It's still an issue because, as I preach on this show, please don't buy CBD products at convenience stores or gas stations, okay? If this is truly a medicine and you want to self-medicate, you need to make sure you're getting what you think you're getting. Right, Mark?
Listen, you want to get what you pay for. It's not cheap. And, you know, the reason is that there's a lot of work involved in making the products. There really is.
Absolutely.
And we still don't have enough of a grow. So, yeah, I mean, economics provides for that. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And hey,
so testing is imperative. You're right.
Can I look at him over here now? Oh, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, what's up? Hang on a second. I have to talk with my studio director because we don't have an IFB system, you know, like real television. You know what I mean? Yes, Dan.
Jimmy, this is beautiful.
Okay, let's talk about the dosing because everybody has to have a different dose because it affects everybody differently, right, Mark?
Everybody's receptor count is different. It changes over the course of your life. It changes according to what's going on in your body. Yeah.
Will we ever develop a test to check on our endocannabinoid system and our levels or anything like that? Do you see that might be coming down the line in 10 years? I mean, as opposed to where
I'm
we're
sure
at now.
people are working on it, Jimmy, because it would be a great tool to have, you know, to really be able to judge the level of the health of your endocannabinoid system. But honestly, I think it's so complex that it would be mind-boggling to try to understand how you would do that. Really.
So the general rule of thumb, and Sherry's the one who taught me this, right? You start low and you go slow, and that's
which is a problem for people.
Right, and that's the THC and CBD blend. What is your opinion about the entourage effect?
Okay, so the entourage effect is a real phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as people know, and I'm sure you've had tons of people on the show that have talked about what it is, you know, it's all of the different chemical components in the cannabis plant working together sort of as lock and key.
Right.
They don't know. Now, science, very, very, you know, renowned scientists are doing studies on this, and they admit that it is a true phenomenon. And they will admit they just don't know what it is. I just read a study that was trying to elucidate if what effect terpenes had. And they determined that in this particular study that they couldn't figure out what the terpenes were doing or if they were working at the level of the CB1, CB2 receptors. That's what the study was trying to do. And they figured out that they weren't, except one. Beta caryophyllene was working like CBD at the same receptor site. So we're early on, man. There is an entourage effect. We don't fully understand what it's all about, but you know,
there'll be
somebody safety profile.
Right. There'll be somebody out there that'll earn their PhD in the endocannabinoid system.
Totally.
right, in the next
Yeah.
few years. And you
Yeah.
know, schools like the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, I would think.
Yeah.
We know of the Cleveland School of Cannabis that has a 156-hour set of courses, a campus in Cleveland. They also have an online.
Yeah.
Last week, I talked with Max Simon, who's the founder of greenflower.com, green-flower.com, a site
Yep.
that I discovered when I first got my medical card. And I watched at least 100 videos on that site before YouTube took them down, which is an interesting story. Yeah.
Of course they did.
Well, Max called it, he said, you know what? It was an act of censorship. And he's right. It also, I think, had a lot to do with the fact that Jeff Sessions got that Cole memo rescinded and corporate
Where's
America.
Jeff now? Does anybody know?
I think he's got COVID. Anyway. We can only
At least he's not sitting where he was. Yeah, you're right.
That's
he got
right.
the Cole Amendment reversed.
By the way, the guy they replaced him with is no bargain either, let's just say. But
Yeah.
I digress. And I don't like
Right.
to digress into politics because it's a really nasty, nasty time in our world right now.
It
Nurse
always
Mark,
is.
if you could give me one piece of advice,
Yep.
let's just say I'm a newbie. I've never tried it. I don't know anything about it. What
Yep.
would be a piece of advice for someone that is in their 50s?
Yeah.
Okay. And suffers from, let's talk sleep, because we all
Yeah.
know that sleep is probably one of the biggest issues in America, right?
And the older you get, the more it is an issue. Yes.
But I got to tell you, the older I get, the less sleep I need. Although I'm a champion napper, so it works.
See, yeah,
it works pretty well for me.
I agree.
What piece of advice would you give a 50-year-old? Where would they go? Obviously, they can go to the nursemark.com website.
They go,
right?
they go to the greennurse.com. You know, I really think that if you're gonna effectively utilize it, you really should have somebody who's going to coach you on that. Somebody who has that education and really can help you do it, because like you said, everybody's different. They need a different amount to have the effect that they want. And they need different products, like a different strain or different route of administration. And the problem is, from my standpoint, people try it and they say, it doesn't work for me. And they never use it again. And that's a damn shame, because it's not that simple. And once you get the product that works for you, life changes.
It changes your life. That's a perfect way to end this, Nurse Mark. Hey, I'm psyched. First of all, I'm looking forward to seeing a full show. I've only seen clips, but I'm looking forward to that. Please send my love to Sherry. I believe she has her show tonight. Is it a Wednesday night?
She does.
It 7 o'clock?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
8 o'clock?
And we do ours on Thursday night. So she's doing hers tonight.
At the Green Nurse Facebook page?
Yeah.
Green Nurse Facebook page.
Green Nurse Facebook page, streaming out there. Yeah.
And you can find it on Facebook. And we know Nurse Mark is on there as well. So we look forward to seeing you again, man. Can't wait for you to get back to Massachusetts, but please wait until the weather changes. I'll see you next June.
My friend.
Okay, I'll see you next June. Fair enough?
All right, Jimmy. Thanks.
All right, take care. That is
Appreciate
Nurse
it.
Mark Worcester. NurseMark.com is where you'll find him. You'll also find his podcast and shows coming to Pro Cannabis Media in the very near future. Well, that's going to wrap it up here once again for another edition of Cannabis Chat. For my staff, Isabel Turner, Dan French, Karen Solomon out there in the left coast of California, Sarah Galt, and a new member of our team, David Monty. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again live in studio Friday at 4.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Weed Talk Now. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Wait, who can understand Kurt when you're talking behind your mask?
And we have a homeless guy. We decided to have a homeless guy from Canada come on tonight. So let's introduce him.
Go ahead, Kurt. He's your buddy. Go ahead.
We have the one and only Bruce Linton. He's in disguise. He's playing a role in a Adam Sandler movie out of Ottawa. But welcome, Bruce. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. If it's COVID and you try to look sketchy, people stay away.
That's true.
Is that the playoff? Is that the
cough a lot?
Is that the playoff beard? That's what I'd like to know. Is that the playoff beard? Because that's what all the hockey guys do during the playoffs is they grow their beards, right? Right.
It's true. It's sort of the spring theme. But given the fact playoffs are in August, I think they should probably be like shaving everything.
The bald head, for instance. All right, and that's in now anyway. I guess congratulations is in order, Bruce, because over the last few weeks or so, you've been busy raising money for a new company, Collective Growth. Can you tell us a little bit about that adventure and that venture?
Yeah, so it was even a little further back. We officially launched sort of the second last week of May, and so what it is it's called a special purpose acquisition company. Some people would call it a blank check company. What your investors are doing is saying, we would like to put money in a bank account, 150 million US dollars. You're going to, as soon as we do that, you're going to be freely trading stock on NASDAQ in this case. And please report back to us sometime before the next 18 months are up with how you plan to use the money. And if we like the plan, and the units are trading above the price we pay them at, we're in favor and you go do it. We don't like the plan or if things are trading bad, well, you just wasted your time and money. Because you have to, in order to do that, put up a good chunk, $3 or $4 million with a group of people to launch it. And it was, the most interesting part was we did 2.5 days of presentations that would have been in 6 cities in 2 countries. And we had 250 million offered. And I didn't see anyone, and thankfully no one saw me.
That's true.
When we last talked in April, you talked about doing business through Zoom and doing business not in offices anymore. And you even said that you were doing some pitches and you found them to be very effective. And obviously you did it, right? I mean, it's pretty impressive what you were able to pull off.
During COVID, I was directly involved with 3 financings, sort of tech, psychedelics, SPAC, and tech, and actually and a marijuana one as well. And I think what I've taken out of it is anybody running a company right now should say, we've currently for the last 100 days had essentially a budget of about 0 for travel and living, for all the people going around and staying in airplanes. So with a travel and living budget of 0, how bad has business been? And for a lot of companies, it hasn't been bad. And so I hope when they return, as both a shareholder and somebody actually likes the fact that skies can be very blue when you don't pollute the hell out of the place, that every company would say, how could we run our company going forward with 25% of what used to be our travel and living budget? And it's not just about more money. You know what? Your employees are a lot less tired.
That's right.
So
That's
people
right.
will focus their activities on the right things at the right time. And so I'm going to be kind of an advocate that it's almost like a challenge to the companies, because if all you do is go right back to the previous way and a competitor says we can do it more time efficient, wear less people out, and do it for 25% of what you spend, ultimately your competitor is going to win.
Bruce, I got to ask you, being a startup guy, and more of a personal question. You rode the rocket ship up, the 5 billion, the way down. You know, it can be rough on you too. The double firing, if you will, Canopy and Vario, and people taking their shots. On a human side, like, what'd you learn? I mean, obviously it was more enjoyable the way up, but what were the things you learned kind of coming down and people kind of taking their shots at you, and what was it like?
Well, it's a couple of things. One is, I spent the 1 year. So what I did is that within an hour of being fired from Canopy, because, I just want to do what I want to do, I knew what I was going to do the next day in a sense. I knew that I was going to make myself visible because what I wanted to have is a very active year. And the reason I wanted that is I wanted a sampling platter of everything. And if you do a sampling platter, sometimes you get to ones and you go, ugh, what was that? And I had one of those. They probably felt that's what they were doing to me. Maybe I was doing that to them. But the net of it is you get a better perspective. So this year, it's about now 1 year and a couple of weeks. This year is about creating a ton of value in 3 or 4. And you know what? You just focus on what you focus on. I like to use participating in the media. Like, Kurt, did you ever see me on anything where I wasn't wearing a brand? Because if you're going on, you should have a brand, you should be talking about it. So, this is just one of those ones where you guys reached out. I said, man, I got to do it with Kurt. Like, it's, Jimmy gives me a free fish shirt and you give me a headache every time I talk to you, but it's all good.
What are you talking about, buddy? I got the shirts. Come
There's
on.
the fish shirt. There it is. That's right.
I think what I learned is if you want to keep a job, I know the secret. Show up and shut up. That is a good way to keep a job. But when people call me and chase me and say, can you come and help our company? You know why they need me? Because things aren't good. And they need to get better. And so sometimes if you come into a circumstance, what I do is I try to think about 3 Ps. First, I look at, do they have the right plan? And if things are going shitty, the chance that you have the right plan is relatively low. So we have to reassess the plan, and that can get a little prickly for people because a lot of times the people who made the plan that's not working are still the people working there. Second thing I look at is the people. Almost always you have too many, and almost always you have some of the wrong ones in the wrong spots. So it means some people lose their job and some people change jobs. And that can get touchy because you don't know who's who. And then the third thing, which is where I drive most people completely mad, is pace. And what pace is that if you need to make more and better decisions than anybody in your sector, or you're not going to beat them. And so that comes down to things like IT systems. Where are we getting our information? It comes down to customer interaction. How do we know what they don't like? It comes down to things like, what are we actually building a model to achieve on what time horizon? Because if you try to do things really good for the afternoon with the work you do in the morning, your pace is going to be very busy and very short term. And so when I go in, you focus on the plan, you get aimed at the people, and then you get on a drum and you just beat it on pace. And pace is the hardest thing because it's sort of like, for some people, it's what their heart rate is what their heart rate is. And what I know is that if you aren't hammering harder and pushing harder, and if you can't deal with that, then the pace thing will always cause people a headache. And I've concluded that I kind of feel bad that I drive people nuts, but I probably will have a segment that do not like my theory on people, the plan, the people, and the pace. And so that will be a self-selecting thing, I think, for the rest of my life of who wants to work with that.
So that leads right in with the money you just raised and the 3 or 4 projects that are ready to go in it. What appealed, or what's in those? What do those projects tell us, and what appealed to you in that same pace and that description?
Yeah. So in a SPAC, that thing where the $150 million came in, a penalty the money puts on you is they said, we're only going to let you have it for 18 months instead of 24 months. And you know how that hits me in the mind. If I still have your money in 18 months and have done nothing, I don't know what went wrong, but it was like 1,000 things. And so that model where you have currency that's a listed stock and you have cash, and then what you're doing is making deals to assemble all these pieces that on the basis of their assembly are worth more than they were independently. That's not going to work, man. That's like going to play every day. I'm really active in Europe with a fund we've set up called OSCARE, O-S-K-A-R-E. And we launched in, end of June, beginning of this month. And what it's doing is it's raising money to take this European federally permissible platform with phenomenal pharmaceutical history and regulations that allow, you can see when Germany, maybe Greece are going to go wreck, but you have this great medical platform and you can do research. And so we're trying to fund the sort of 3rd, 4th waves of products and things out of Europe. And then, you get things like Gage Cannabis. I was on with those guys today, and they're in Michigan. And you can't believe the rate at which they're growing. So what you want to do is make sure you're helping them always figure out what the best sources of capital are. Make sure that we don't get in a situation where our balance sheet's kind of messed up because you got everything tied up in lease lendbacks and things. So those kind of things really get you going. This hat is Rockify, and it's software, but it's software like, if you have more time to stop, which I've had, on and off, you start thinking about the reason we started Ruckify is that it annoyed me that I didn't own certain things that I needed to use and I wanted access to them. So it really thought it was a software application so I could figure out kind of what's in my neighbor's garage effectively and give them a little bit of rent for it, insure it so that if I wreck it, they get a new one. It's not my problem. But when I thought about it, and we worked on it a lot, almost everything all of us own that's in our garage, basement, and a lot of stuff in your kitchen, you use for about an hour a year. That aluminum ladder is a perfect example.
Yes.
You
It's
got
under
one?
my deck. Yeah, it's under my
I
deck.
know you bought that. You were super proud the day you bought it, and you bought a good one. Everybody buys a good one. And then
right.
use it to, like, I don't know, take some leaves out of the eaves trough in the spring or fall or something. Why we would ever make another one is insane, because to make that ladder, they had to dig some honking holes, take the ferrous materials out, smelt them down, roll the aluminum, ship it somewhere, da-da-da-da-da. The next thing you know, what they've really made is a big environmental drain. And instead, what they should have is you should have yours on Ruckify, and everybody who needs it pays you $10. It gets picked up by an Uber-like equivalent, depending on the length of your ladder. And the guy doesn't have to store it, he just uses it. And think that through. You say you could do that for tents, you could do that for mix masters. We have over 500,000 items in there, and we're just starting. And what I like about it is, I think when you exit COVID, you enter a recession. Even in COVID, we're in a recession. And so anybody who's got a ladder under the deck should think about, how do I make an extra few $100 a year off this ladder? And anybody who doesn't want to spend the $200 to buy it should say, how can I use $15 to rent it? And so the matching of interest happens and the environmental happens. And I kind of belabor that one, because one of the things I thought about is I only want to work on things that I think will make a meaningful, disruptive, positive impact.
And you found one. You certainly found one. I want to ask you, do I have to white?
I co-founded it because I was pissed off I couldn't get a chainsaw big enough to finish the cutting job I was doing.
I got a chainsaw under the deck. Well, not under the deck. In the garage. I could have let you borrow it. Right?
You know, what I hear right now is you are basically Mr. Money Pots. You're letting money just sit idle when you should be actually Ruckifying it. Like, turn your coat upside, man. There's going to be like $1,000 fall out of your pockets.
No, absolutely not. Not my pockets. Absolutely not. When you share this now, you mentioned COVID and this whole new world that we're in. I'm guessing that you have to wipe down the product that you're going to rent as well, because everybody's worried about surfaces, right?
For sure, but here's what we thought. Well, as soon as COVID was announced, we thought, boy, we're pretty screwed. But after about a week of that thought, even less, we went, so if you can't go to the gym, can the gym come to you? Right. It turns out people wanted gym stuff. So from Austin to Ottawa, we helped them empty out gyms where you would say, I want a treadmill. You'd say you want it for 3 weeks. Turns out you want it for 2 months. The gym didn't have insurance for the stuff when it left the gym. We did. The gym didn't have a charging platform in terms of commerce. We did, for this kind of weekly, daily, hourly. And the gym didn't have transport systems available. We do. And so all of a sudden, all you have to do is, usually if it's not working, just turn it upside down and see what's going on. And so, like, instead of Ruckifying that way, we Ruckified, like, you can't go to the gym. Didn't say the gym can't come to you.
That's funny you say that, because a really sharp guy sent you some information on a mirror system where you could work out at home, and they got bought by Peloton a month or two later for $500 million. That's
unbelievable.
Happening.
Well, and you know what? That mirror system, so I actually checked that thing out. You know where it was fascinating to me is it was getting picked up by, say, like the Heart and Stroke Foundation. So if you had a stroke, you have to do a zillion repetitive exercises to rebuild the functionality. And it turns out that mirror application was the best physio sort of rehab tool for all kinds of cohorts. So I was starting to do my digging, and next thing though, they ate it.
And then Peloton beat you to it.
But I think it extends Peloton into a whole therapeutic renewal space that they were never going to be able to touch with their prior hardware and software.
Yeah.
I tried to actually order that. I went online, I tried to order that mirror product, and I couldn't get through to their website because it was too busy or something. I don't know. I gave up after a while, though. I did check it out, though. I like the idea. I do.
You know what I discovered during COVID? A lot of things. One of them is that there are workouts on YouTube. Right. And they're free. And there's one.
You could have found that out before COVID. I'm just saying.
And there's one
well, you had a lot
by
of
this
time on
lady
his hands.
named Inger Houghton, and she's got about 2 million views. I think I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 of them because we, on a daily basis, do it. And they're phenomenal ways to work out. Actually, I learned that if you said, what is Tabata Songs a person or a style of music? I would have said, well, that's a person. Turns out Tabata Songs is not a person. It's a style of music which is terrific to work out by, and it's free. And I think all that I discovered is that I'm an idiot to have paid a gym membership for the last 25 years. Kurt, bad news. Your shirt might not be worn in public as much as I used to wear it.
I was going to say, do you know what tread Tabata is? That's basically the workout you're doing on a treadmill. So, yep, I know these things.
It's amazing, though.
Yep.
I love it.
How do you feel about
Bruce,
hemp
last
now?
night.
What's
Okay.
your
Yeah,
view of hemp? Because
go
that's
ahead.
why the whole fund was kind of put together. You loved hemp. Do you still love hemp?
Yes, but to be clear, I love hemp, the industrial side of hemp.
Yep.
And so most of the bad reputation of hemp was because it looked like marijuana and got banned for 80 years because theoretically it was marijuana. I think it was because it was actually competitive to nylon and to pulp and paper and things like that. And then when it came back in 2018, the problem was there was no infrastructure to transform industrial hemp into anything useful. And everybody's so excited about CBD. So if they grew 1 million acres, like 999,000 were of short, no industrial hemp value in terms of the fiber and just a bunch of CBD. But like when we did our analysis, there's a couple hundred categories of current industrial supply products that can be more sustainably, more price effectively produced when you grow hemp of the right kind and put it through the right processes. And so what I'm mainly excited isn't ever having a tractor in hemp, and I don't really want to make the bumper for the car. What we want to do is take high value applications and take the whole plant, because think about it, a hemp plant is about the size of your thumb and it's 21 feet tall and it doesn't fall over. So up the side of it are all these cables, these really strong fibers. And so think of that stuff, and if you do the right things with it, you can actually make them conductive of electricity like copper. They weigh less, stronger than steel. So there's all kinds of applications, and what we're trying to do is think through all of them so you monetize every piece of that plant, and you end up with a situation where you shorten the supply chain. Because what people in every country are going to want after COVID for a long time, at least the lifetime of the people who've experienced, is how do I not depend on other countries for things I find I have to have? And if hemp can be a big part of that list, it means you shorten the supply chain. You're not getting stuff from all over the world. You're growing it and processing it in America. And I think it's going to impact everything from like auto industry to where you get your next pair of jeans and what the mix of cotton and hemp is.
Do you have hemp in the fund yet? Are you looking at companies?
Yeah, so probably our biggest blessing and biggest challenge is that most of the fact that it was illegal in America meant that it was happening elsewhere. And where it was happening, it wasn't illegal, but because it wasn't the major market, you have a lot of successfully operating small to medium-sized companies. And so typically, if you're going to do what they call the SPAC, the thing I described earlier, what you do is you go buy one huge company and you put it in there. And instead, what we're going to have to do is a little bit more dicey. We're going to stitch together 4, 5, 6 of them. And then we're going to make it so that together they're way better than they were independently. And what you'll have is this thing that could grow like crazy. And, my goal is, I told people in 2014, company Cannabis Tweet, I started in 2013. One guy came and saw me and he said, 2014, you gave me the pitch and you said, I asked you, what do you think the company looks like in 3 years? And I said, well, I don't know if it's worth 1 billion or 2, but it's for sure a unicorn type company. And the reason is a lot of people like marijuana, very few licenses are going to be issued, and we're the first country on the planet to rationally govern it. If that's not $1 billion enterprise, it means we dropped the ball on the way to the actual prize. And I think the same thing is going to happen with hemp. And I think its applications are actually more broad and more disruptive than cannabis.
Absolutely. Can I ask you a question, Bruce, about valuations of companies? I know that you have been down this road many, many times. When we talked to Terry Buell yesterday from the Cannabis Law Report, of course, we were referring to High Times and everything that they're going through. But how do you come up with a valuation that makes sense when you go in front of people who you're pitching for investment, though?
Yeah. It's a hard question because everything's only worth what people will pay for it. And what they want to pay for things at different times can change dramatically. And so I would say that answer for any corporation in any change sector changes every 6 months. It can go up and down. And so you need to be able to read the room to know which direction things are going. And you need to be hopeful that you didn't start too high and you were beginning your pricing at a peak and you got nothing but pain. And so what I would sooner do is I would sooner do 5 financings and be what people call dilution. Let me explain my view on dilution. If you give me $1, I expect to turn it into 10. That's called value creation. I own less of the company, but because of your dollar, it's worth a hell of a lot more. Now, if I was afraid of dilution, what I'm really afraid of is that if you give me $1, I turn it into 50 cents. Now the thing's worth less. I did not do value creation. So it is my view that those people who are fundamentally terrified of dilution are actually fundamentally terrified of their own business plan and their own competence. And so I think people who start and try and get a very high valuation, grab the money once at a huge level, don't have confidence in their own business plan. And so I am very, very concerned when I see that. I would sooner see somebody who says, you know, give me $1, I'll make it to 10, I'll come back and see you, and you'll give me $2 more because you love me. And I know it doesn't answer the question, but to me, you are way better. It's kind of like when we released gel caps and oils. You're way better to, well, that was dose low and go slow, but this is much better to actually start low and always go up. And so I hate these big things. The other part is I would look at if their last round had nothing but retail, and if their average, if you asked 95% of the owners of a stock what the price is or what the value is, if you said, what's the value? If what they tell you is the price per share and they have no idea what the shares outstanding are, all you've done is tricked a bunch of retail because they can't even answer the question on what's the market cap. Like, who cares what the price is per share? If you do enough splits or enough consolidation, you can manipulate it to any price you want per share. It's the market cap that matters. And I get a lot of people who even pitch me who are the owners and operators of a company. They'll say, you got to get now. It's a 40-cent round. Well, what the hell does that mean? Like, I could have had a company that had a 40-cent round. I would have just had to do like a 1,000-to-1 split. But who wants a 40-cent round? I want to know what's the market cap. So I think valuations are sometimes opportunistic, and those that do that are often punished. And we're seeing that in the sector now, right? Yeah. How many down round, heavy warrant coverage, rewriting of the terms of convertibles, like convertible killer notes are still everywhere. One company came to me and said, can you help us find somebody to buy us? The only criteria is the home cannot have a big convertible overhang. They just can't, you don't know what's going to happen underneath that.
Gotcha.
Wow. What do you like in?
All right, I got to follow.
In Michigan, what
I got to follow up, Kurt.
The
when you want.
Marijuana scene, and you're in Michigan. What anything you like? Anything you're looking at, or what do you think of the sector in general?
So Michigan, I'm involved with Gage. I would say demand is twice as much as we thought, and the rules are well administered. If you can get the licenses to be vertically stacked and actually control your own destiny, massively beneficial. It's essentially Florida spelt a little differently. And it's really well run. And I would say the operator I'm involved with, you know, you can see directly from every place you're growing to everywhere you're selling, the timeline where you can actually recognize revenue. And that kind of business, you know what the single biggest problem of being Gage in Michigan? Working capital, because you're growing so quickly. Because when you're going to open up a store, you got to build a store. Then you got to fill the store with product. And that means you had to build a building to build the product, grow the product, and you got to have a time to clear it. And so when you're growing at like doubling every 3 or 4 months, that's a lot of happening. But it seems that, more and more of the areas that were medical only are saying, yeah, you know what, we're changed our mind. We're going to let it become rec as well. So directionally, it's just great. It wasn't left, you guys are a mass, or at least you're a mass. It wasn't screwed by the choice that you're not essential. It was essential. So I just,
It was
anything with good regulatory structure matters. And that's why, how many times have you guys been, think back 3, 4, 5 years ago, everybody said, you got to be in California. You got to be in California. I don't know, man. That's a good story for a couple, but it's a tough piece of work compared to being early and focused in a state like Michigan.
And in Massachusetts, just to correct it again, the governor here deemed medical cannabis essential, but stopped adult use rec. And they were the only state in the country to do that, I might add.
He also closed all the liquor stores and stuff.
Yeah. Sure he did. Yeah, no, because he had to go to them. He needed those open, and that's a completely different story for another day. But I want to go back to companies and specifically media companies. There have been a lot of media companies in the United States that were properly capitalized that have gone south within 1 to 2 years of their operation. What did they do wrong, or is it too early to actually create a media company because the market hasn't even evolved yet?
Yeah, well, I think some of them took hot money, right? Like, oh, this is a great story, a great brand, a great space. We're going to put this much money in. And then the next thing you know, because it's not going as the money thought it was going to do, what they do is they kill you, Jamie, or they kill you, Kurt, and they put somebody else and they hire. You know what? That doesn't work because you guys don't actually know exactly how your business is going to look in December. But what you're going to do is work at it and think about it constantly. Yes. And so I would say outside funding and the pressures that result from that in your sector, and a lot of times I would say your sector got overfunded just like for a while vape pens did. Why? Because you were not plant touching, but you were near the story. So It was a great safe way for people. But like I'd say 4 years ago, I think the allocation of capital to vape pen development was probably 50x what it should have been. And in the media space, we had more media coverage, more media entities springing up around cannabis than tech still had. Like if you think about it, you guys on two hands couldn't count all of the players that were on the field over the last 4 years in your space.
Right.
So that's a lot of, and so I know a number of them that have died, and I can't think of any of them that died because of an absence of capital. They often almost died because they burned through it, and it was outside capital.
Right.
Like tonight's your big night, right, Jimmy? You actually have someone working with you.
Yes, and it's a deal, I might add, right now, just because they haven't asked to be paid yet, because they're so excited to be part of something new.
Right, but I would say that we should reconvene about every 3 months, and I suspect the field of participants you're dealing with will continue to decrease because a lot of the media guys are attached to events companies.
Right.
Oh, your primary money comes from having an event, and the reason you can fund your media outreach in between events is it's kind of feeder system. What happens in that equation when you take down the events?
And that's exactly what they're faced with right now. MJ Biz is the perfect example. The largest convention. They're trying to do it online, and it's just not the same experience at all.
Yeah, well, I look for I liked it when it was at the Rio, so you had a reason to go to the Rio, and actually a reason to stand in line with a whole bunch of other people. How am I going to actually get that annual experience?
And in fact, Kurt, one of our friends, and Bruce, I think you know Doug Gordon too, I guess CanX now has been canceled for September. Another one bites the dust as, what's that song? You guys are much more hip than I am. I bet you even know who.
Yeah, but there's Doug. Doug is probably the most networked guy for this topic through the Caribbean region. He had done a great job of bringing people in from South America as well. It was a good destination show in Jamaica. I was there the last 2 years. You were there at least one of them for sure, Kurt, and I think two.
Two or three, just two.
Kurt went to two, and he dragged me to last year in September, and it was a great show. I admit it. I feel bad for Doug.
Yeah, but that was a quality show. You think about the number of attendants, the number of geographies. So it is, it's that combo thing I think is going to kill them, because I think a lot of the media companies weren't actually media companies. They were actually extensions of events used to keep the event relevant between occurrences of the event.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I think they're discovering now that the webinars that a lot of them are putting online are not attracting the eyeballs that, of course, you need to be a successful media company. It is a basic 101 media there. You have to have audience.
It's the gyms that we took all the stuff out of the gym are making way more money than the gyms that are running online seminars. So you learn how to unroll your yoga mat or something, and they think you're going to actually pay to watch like the gym online. Zero. So like you can't, you have to change what your business model is. You can't just sort of try to do a gentle migration for some of these things. It just doesn't work.
Adapt and improvise.
Yeah, as far as a guy who developed products, I'm curious your opinion on this debate, because I riled up some millennials. I say, and all the studies say, branding in the cannabis space is irrelevant based on consumer response. Yet millennials who run websites and do marketing will swear they have to, every cannabis product has to look like it comes from the Apple store or a Nike store.
Yeah.
How important is cannabis branding when you were building out the Canopy brands and the products? And what do you think of it now as far as the color, the logo, the sleekness? Are you say absolutely important, a little important, or it turns out to be irrelevant as studies show?
So my pitch was, and would still be, unless you have unlimited spend, branding is nothing more than a marketing war unless you do one thing fundamentally different. Whatever product is in there should be able to be identified by the consumer without a label across an array of similar selections presented by your competitors. So if you do not have something fundamentally superior and better, then all you are is in a marketing war over the jersey. And so first, and we applied this particularly in the place of beverages. We said that like it must be amazing, and then it must have an identifiable shape of a can. So like the 2 milligram Tweed and Tonic is in a tall, slender can. You know how many calories it has? 0. Now, a tall, slender can full of clear beverage, does that make you think? Bet that doesn't have calories. Bet that makes me feel tall and slender. So I think branding, product, packaging have to actually convey the purpose. So the ones we made for Seth are phenomenal. They're this grapefruit kind of really more carbonated than the Tweed and Tonic. And it's in kind of a fun, crazy pink can. If you've ever actually hung around Seth and heard him laugh, that can doesn't laugh and be nearly as crazy as him. So but it makes a ton of sense because it's a refreshing, so I think, I don't know that you can, it's almost, the argument to me is missing the point. You guys agree. What you want is a great and differentiated product that you can identify without cool packaging. And then you want the packaging to represent the intent of the brand and the quality and type of product inside.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah. But you know what? You will come to Canada. You know what you're going to look at? I guarantee you the can you're going to look at, if you saw the 3 primary beverages that are selling, there's the tall, slender one, there's the pink one, and there's one in a black can, and it's a little stocky, and it kind of looks like, you will grab that one. You say, that's more what I like, and it's the much stronger one, and it's called Deep Space. And it's a 10 milligram beverage with high intake, but it's intended, like if the guy looks like Kurt, he's going to go for that one. Like he's going to, and it's the top selling SKU because it has a higher amount in it. Guys walk in, they see the can, they hear the story, they buy the product, they come back and they buy.
And I'm comfortable buying the pink one. I just am. I just want to say that because I'm comfortable with that. By the way, speaking of cans, I did see a story today that aluminum, or as they say in Europe, aluminium, they're looking for it. There's not a lot of it out there right now because everybody's at home drinking their aluminum cans in their beers and their sodas. Now, what are you saying?
No, it's because you have stupid aluminum ladders under your deck.
I was just going to say that. I go, they all made the ladders out of them. What do you mean?
Oh gosh! You are. What am I going? Where's Kurt going? Where's Kurt going? He just left the show.
He's going to get his ladder. He's going to get his ladder.
I don't know what you're talking about.
There you go. There we go. Doesn't work. It doesn't work in a virtual world. He's learning about green screen, right? It doesn't work.
I thought you were going out to get your ladder.
Well, now I'm thinking about, I gotta go see what's under my porch. Wheelbarrows.
Hey, fantastic. Hey, Bruce Linton, as always, extremely entertaining, informative, and educational talking to you. You are, what's it?
And hopeless.
And homeless. I think he's doing all right. He's in the same room he was in a couple months ago. That's a good sign, right?
True.
And
house arrest continues.
That's right. We wish you best of luck with your future venture. Anything we can do to help you out, tell that story. That's what we like to do on this particular internet site. And I know you're tight with Kurt. I guess you could keep that going if you'd like.
Remember what I bought?
That's right. Oh, and now I have your cell phone too, so I'm going to send you text. So you're really in trouble now.
I love it. Well, you guys keep up the good work. I love it. Keep it going and be healthy and well, and let's prosper.
You bet. Thank you very much, Bruce Linton from O Canada up there. And we will say goodnight for this version of Weed Talk Now. So for Kurt Dalton and Bruce Linton, I'm Jimmy Young. We'll catch you next time. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.